Your Royal Highness, Your Royal Highness, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, dear colleagues and friends, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Helen Chen, Huaxian Helen Chen. I'm 16 years old, and I am an aspiring scientist and girl from Canada. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to everyone here today, especially those who have traveled very far to be here in New York City for the 3rd Annual International Day for Women and Girls in Science Forum. Welcome all. I'd like to thank all the people who have made today and tomorrow possible, and in particular, the Royal Academy of Science International Trust and the government of Malta for pioneering this idea 3 years ago. I'd also like to thank the co-organizers, UNCTAD, and the missions of Costa Rica, Hungary, and Vietnam to the United Nations, as well as the member states and UN agencies co-sponsoring this forum. It is the 50th anniversary for RASIT and the 20th anniversary for RASIT UNESCO First International Youth Conference. RASIT for 50 years has invested in youth, tomorrow's leaders, and it's still faithful to this commitment. That is why I'm moderating the opening segment today. Women and girls are more than wanted in science. They are needed in science. As an aspiring scientist, I believe and know that we cannot move forward most effectively and efficiently without half the population who are equally as skilled and intelligent as the other. What's lagging behind is opportunity and experience, and that is the reason why we are all here today. These past years, the spotlight has begun to turn to youth and the power of youth. We are capable of so much. We're the future women and men in science, and we are taking the lead from now and making history, starting from today. As my Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, says, we are the leaders tomorrow, we are the leaders of today, and our journey begins at this moment. I'm so grateful, thankful, and privileged to be speaking on behalf of other girls and girls interested in science around the world. And with those remarks, I'll hand it over to someone who is a great mentor to me and the person who got me here today. I look up to her, she and I have the same goal, and she is someone who inspires me every single day. She is Princess Dr. Nasreen Al-Hashmaiti, founder and president of Women in Science International League and the executive director of the Royal Academy of Science International Trust.
Thank you very much indeed, Helen, for this, Ms. Chen, for this introduction. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Royal Academy of Science International Trust, I would like to welcome all of you to the 3rd commemoration of our day. It is very heartening to see such a great turnout from so many of you who have been able to come from different countries and states for this remarkable day. This year's event couldn't be more timely, and I couldn't be more glad to witness a 16-year-old girl in science is moderating a formal opening segment at the United Nations. Girls in science from different countries, including India, Costa Rica, Turkey, and other American states, are having their own panel to discuss their future in science. Men and boys who are supporting our vision to dream and aim large to achieve equality and parity in science are joining us. In the first commemoration, ladies and gentlemen, I spoke about turning a dream into reality. Every February, we celebrate the achievements of women in science, known and unknown, remembered and forgotten, who have forged the way for those of us in science today. The International Day of Women in Science logo depicts just this. In the second commemoration, I spoke about moving from reality into a year of implementation and strong commitment to support women and girls in science, as well as science education for the SDGs and beyond. Thanks to RASIT's team and to our colleagues from around the world, the real results are: today, more than ever, the UN system recognizes the role of women and girls in science in sustainable development, and that recognition will be the spark for women and girls in science to empower themselves to aim for the highest trajectory possible. Today, more than ever, the private sector is committed to empowering women and girls in science, starting with private sector's commitment to increase the number of women in science employed, to their ads on television featuring women and girls in science, all the way to the recent toys produced by Legos featuring women astronauts, etc., etc. Today, more than ever, the UN system is recognizing women in science. Last October, Madam Lakshmi Puri realized one of our dreams, which I shared last February at the UN, and announced that the desire for appointing female astronauts as UN Women Ambassadors for Space. Today, more than ever, the achievement of women in science are recognized by their colleagues. For example, University Europa do Madrid named the science laboratories after women scientists. And I hope more universities around the world will follow. Women in science are more engaged in with the society. For example, in Italy, they are organizing different activities to popularize science. The Czech Technical University in Prague is organizing a practical physics master classes for high school girl students to get the chance to explore this field. Today, the governmental bodies are celebrating the achievements of women in science. For example, throughout February 2018, and for the first time, members of the Environment Agency of UK are highlighting the contribution made by female scientists nationwide. In Spain, there are, throughout the month of February, there are more than 1,000 activities all over the country are being organized to celebrate our day. Even shops in Spain are decorating its windows with women in science and the hashtag February 11. There are so many examples, and these are some few. We are not done yet. There is a lot to be done. Now, we are working beyond commemorating the International Day of Women and Girls in Science. In fact, we are working to tackle the problem and solve it, because we cannot afford another 25 years of international community reports to inform us about the gender gap in science, gender pay gap, and so on. We, women in science, cannot sit and listen to reports showing that advancement of women and girls in science has not only stalled, but the international community is seeing recidivists slide backwards and not to do anything. Ladies and gentlemen, I am a woman in science. I am an MD, PhD, and so many people call me around the world the science princess. And today I met another science princess. Her name is Kemia Helmster, 7 years old. She put science princess. I lived the problem of inequality in science and realized that inequality in science is much more in developed countries. While in many developing countries, equality and parity in science does exist. But women in science in developing countries lack the financial support and the modern laboratories and equipment to conduct research much more because of financial issues. They cannot be present at international conferences to share their scientific achievements. Actually, what is needed in many developing countries is a science policy interface, and this is the role of the UN Commission on Science and Technology for Development in suggesting policy recommendations to heads of states and governments. What we really need is understanding equality and parity in science through capacity building, cooperation, and data governance. We need action plans and programs of actions pertaining to the situation of science, technology, and innovation that address the status of women and girls in science at the international level, as well as both at regional and national levels. Well, some people might think that my colleagues and I are dreamers. Well, the International Day of Women and Girls in Science was a dream. It started with an individual actions between two women in science, and that led to collective power and translated to exceptional impact. This year is a very remarkable year for me, ladies and gentlemen. It is 2018 marks important milestones on several landmarks. The 50th anniversary of Royal Academy of Science, International Trust that was founded by His Royal Highness Prince Mohammed bin King Faisal I Al-Hashemite, and RASIT served more than 21,500 higher education students to face the challenges of the continuously changing and developing world. It is worth mentioning that half of them are females, thus RASIT achieved the 50-50 ratio a long time ago. This year, we celebrate 35 years of RASIT Sustainable Development Studies Center, and we celebrate the 20th anniversary of the Women in Science International League, the first international league dedicated to promoting the excellence of women in science. RASIT has been an organization with an infinite vision into the future, and we will continue this tradition of measureless services for the benefit of mankind. As a woman in science, I gained my strength from my parents, brothers, RASIT teams, and associates, as well as from my role models. I'm still gaining my strength from a girl that I wish I will have the honor one day to meet her. Since May 2014, Purna Malavath, an Indian girl, a villager who became the youngest girl in the world to have reached the summit of Everest. This villager girl said, "My reason for climbing Mount Everest was to prove that girls can achieve anything." Purna's impact on her society and community is remarkable. The number of girls going to schools increased, the number of early marriages decreased. I, Nisreen al-Hashimite, learned from Purna that courage has no limit, and I wish all women and girls in science will learn from her the same. I would like, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to conclude by thanking the entire RASIT team, especially Ms. Rola Dahlan and Nora Mahdi, for their work that constantly presented itself. I would like to thank Her Excellency, my dear colleague and friend, the lady who stood beside us and believed in us in this as a minister, as a woman in science, Dr. Helena Dali. A special thanks to the Mission of Malta and to the UN, Mission of Malta to the UN, and Ambassador Carmelo and Ms. Annalise Summit. I also would like to thank the permanent missions of Hungary, Costa Rica, Vietnam to the United Nations, as well as UNCTAD for taking the lead with us in organizing this year's event. To their excellencies, the ambassadors of Hungary, Costa Rica, and Vietnam, and to Ms. Chantaline Carpentier, Comba, Veronica, Diego, Adelaida, and Nogan, thank you so much for all your efforts. I further would like to thank the member states and agencies for co-sponsoring this year's event. Finally, I would like to thank all of you, distinguished guests and speakers, participants and attendees, for making this day very special. With our presence at the United Nations, we have been writing the future's history, and today is another step towards our idea of creating history sooner than later. Thank you.
Thank you, Royal Highness Princess Dr. Nisreen Hashmite. When His Excellency Mr. Guterres was appointed the UN Secretary General, I still remember reading his biography, learning that he was the best student in his country. From that moment forward, I'm following in his footsteps to become just like him, hopefully the best student, and also a diplomat or lawyer with a background in the sciences in the future. I thank him for advocating for peace, for youth, and it's my honor to welcome the 9th Secretary General of the United Nations, His Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres, who is unable to join us, but he has left us a video message.
Both girls and boys have the potential to pursue their ambitions in science and mathematics, in school and at work. But systemic discrimination means women occupy less than 30% of research and development jobs worldwide. We need concerted, concrete efforts to overcome stereotypes and biases. One starting point is banishing the predominantly male images of scientists and innovators on social media, in textbooks and in advertising. We need to encourage and support girls and women to achieve their full potential as scientific researchers and innovators. Women and girls need this, and the world needs this, if we are able to achieve our ambitions for sustainable development on a healthy planet. Throughout history, From Hildegard of Bingen to Wangari Maathai, women scientists have built our worlds. It's time to support and invest in them.
Thank you, Mr. Antonio Guterres. His Excellency, Mr. Miroslav Lajčák, the President of the General Assembly's remarks will be delivered by His Excellency, Mr. Kai Sauer, Permanent Representative of Finland to the UN in his capacity as the Vice President of the General Assembly.
Excellencies, Science Princesses, a very good morning. I'm delivering the statement on behalf of the President of the General Assembly, His Excellency Mr. Miroslav Lajčák, who conveys his regrets that he could not be here to deliver it in person, as he is currently in the Republic of Korea for the Winter Olympics. It is a great pleasure to address the third International Day of Women and Girls in Science Forum. I want to thank the Republic of Malta and the Royal Academy of Science International Trust for convening us around this important issue. And I want to make 3 main points today. For my first point, I will address the myth that women and girls are not as good at science as men and boys. If this was true, Marie Curie would not have developed the theory of radioactivity. If this was true, the world's first computer programmer would not have been a woman called Ada Lovelace. And if this was true, we would not continue to see examples today of women who are driving innovation and breaking records. One example is Tierra Quinn, who started working with NASA to get humans to Mars before she had even graduated from university. However, even though we know that this myth is false, we must still face an unhappy truth, which is that women and girls remain vastly underrepresented. Which brings me to the second point of this morning. There are serious barriers facing women and girls. These barriers have changed over time. In the past, women were simply shut out from science and research. They were prevented from publishing their findings. They were blocked from taking up teaching positions in universities. The hurdles facing women today are different. They are not as tangible, but that does not mean that they do not have damaging effects. Stereotypes, education gaps, a lack of mentoring and guidance, inhospitable working environments, implicit or sometimes explicit bias in recruitment. These barriers need to be dismantled, and thankfully we are doing that. We have seen some exciting initiatives such as scholarships for women software engineers, social media campaigns to highlight women's achievements in STEM, women scientists featured in children's television series, or research funding targeted at women and girls. Today's event will showcase even more of these best practices. Not only that, it will also contribute to our wider efforts for sustainable development. And that is the third and final point I would like to make. Because the technology and innovation we need to achieve the SDGs are not possible without women and girls. If we want to protect the planet and improve the lives of the people living on it, women must participate, and they must lead. I'm glad that the United Nations is working to strengthen its own record in this respect. Last month, full gender parity was achieved among top UN leadership for the first time. What's more, almost all of the processes linked to the General Assembly are facilitated or chaired by gender-balanced teams. But we need to do more. This International Day is another opportunity to explore how. Please speak up, please share your ideas, and please help to ensure that the momentum seen today continues all year round. Thank you. Thank you. That's a good text.
Thank you, Mr. Kai Sauer and Mr. Miroslav Lajčák. I'd like to now welcome someone who's incredibly motivational. She was the first Maltese nominee and winner of the European Diversity Award for her work in human rights and equality at the local and international level. I'd like to welcome Her Excellency Dr. Helena Dali, Minister for European Affairs and Equality of the Republic of Malta.
Thank you so much. And good morning and welcome, Excellencies, colleagues and friends. It's a great pleasure to be here celebrating the 3rd International Day of Women and Girls in Science, working together towards gender parity in science. 3 years ago, Malta and RASIT put forward to the UN General Assembly a resolution that declares February 11th as the International Day of Women and Girls in Science. In most spheres of life, gender disparities persist. Thus, the need to continue promoting gender equality by working collectively to put women at the forefront of science and academia. Since the beginning, we have worked to raise awareness on issues pertaining to existent gender inequalities that persist within the realm of science. Indeed, this is the 3rd year that global stakeholders are joining us in our pledge to support and seek culturally relevant solutions to reaching gender parity in science. Interest and support for this International Day have grown immensely. We are very pleased that, along with my own country, Malta, and our collaborative partner, the Royal Academy of Science International Trust, the RASIT, this event was co-organized with the assistance of the permanent missions of Costa Rica, Hungary, and Vietnam, as well as the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. And in addition to our co-organizers, this event has been co-sponsored by 10 member states and 3 organizations. In October last year, the international science magazine New Scientist was still trying to explain the lack of diversity in science, technology, engineering, and math as far as gender is concerned, excluding that it could be a question of biological factors. New Scientist puts the reason behind the issue as being the highly gender-divided culture that children are reared in. This needs to be addressed at all levels, local, national, and international. We gather annually to share our commitments and the best practices as part of a collective global effort to strengthen gender parity in science. To kick off our discussion, I want to share my country's experience in its efforts to place women at the center of the pharmaceutical sciences. Through collaboration between industry, education, and government, women are not only encouraged to follow a university education in the pharmaceutical sciences, but are empowered to take up leadership positions. Starting from education, the Faculty of Pharmacy at the University of Malta is led by a young woman scientist. She was successful in not only being elected as head of department and endorsed by the highest body at the University Council, but also succeeded to become the first woman president of the European Association of Faculties of Pharmacy. Throughout her career, she has published internationally no less than 7 books, a number of chapters, and over 200 scientific publications and presentations all over Europe, the United States, Middle East, and Asia. Women are in top positions in the pharmaceutical industry, from general managers to QPs for batch release to R&D managers. Academic women have succeeded to keep an attachment to the pharmaceutical industry through the facilitation of academic placements of students in the pharma industry and through participation in scientific research. such as in the development of green pharmaceutical processes adopted in the synthesis of active pharmaceutical ingredients. A remarkable success in advancing women in science was witnessed within a government entity in Malta which regulates the pharmaceutical industry. The Malta Medicines Authority was successfully transformed from a regulatory body to a scientific institution. This transformation was possible by the positioning of women as scientists within the authority. An important outcome of this positioning of women scientists within the authority reform was that the authority moved from an financially unstable institution to one with enough money to dedicate for the scientific advancement and for innovation. Women could excel in these managerial positions because they were given the opportunity. Methods adopted to sustain women scientists included the incorporation of family-friendly measures such as flexi-time and telework, which up to a few years ago were considered unattainable in this area. The cooperation between industry, academia, and government entities brought to fruition an international postgraduate, graduate, doctorate program for pharmacists that is offered by the University of Malta. This doctorate in pharmacy program has attracted women to take up further studies in areas of research, including stem cell studies, pharmacogenetics, innovative medicines, and advanced therapies, individualized therapy based on scientific advancements and biotechnology. It gives me great pleasure, thus, to see working mothers pursuing doctorate degrees. We are obviously not there yet. Much more needs to be done to address gender disparities in science and other areas of science, and I look forward to hear your ideas and initiatives. Let the outcome document we shall be adopting tomorrow serve as a guide for further collaboration in the coming years. As with all motions to usher in positive change and better the world, it is key that all like-minded parties unify to ensure real, tangible, and lasting development. Thank you. Thank you, Excellency.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Dr. Helena Deli. Before I introduce the next speaker, the organizers would like to apologize for some technical problems with the seating name plates. Now, someone who's not only a businesswoman, but also a serial entrepreneur and philanthropist, let us all welcome the Miss Hanzade Dogan Boyer, President of the Aydin Dogan Foundation.
Good morning, Excellencies, distinguished participants. It is a true privilege and joy for me to be here with you to discuss a topic that is close to my heart. Science and technology are amongst humanity's most distinctive and remarkable achievements. If we wish to advance humanity's legacy of science to its full potential and ensure that it will be advanced responsibly to benefit all, it is imperative that women contribute their intellect and judgment in equal measure at every step of this journey. Science is a social, political, and economic enterprise. It entails collective preferences. It does not have a natural, unidirectional flow. We give direction to it with our choices. We decide which scientific questions to pursue, which projects to fund, which risks to take, which dreams to pursue through our collective institutions. Women's role in shaping and leading those institutions is as important as their role in creating science. Our civilization is arguably at the cusp of a scientific, technological transformation, ranging from the strides in genomics to artificial intelligence, from robotics to material science. The technological leaps that await us in the coming decades are exciting and threatening in equal measures. We are creating technologies that can carry us to the techno-enthusiast nirvana or to the destruction of our civilization. Our collective social decisions about science and technology have never been more important, more sensitive, more existential than today. We need the intellect, the insights, but most importantly, the good judgment of the best minds among us to lead our research institutions, our security apparatus, our policy-making bodies, and ultimately our governments. Women are far from being fairly represented at these levels. This is irrational, this is imprudent, and this could ultimately be catastrophic. Ladies and gentlemen, now let me step back from diagnosis and make a few short comments about the normative dimension. What can we do to improve the equality and parity for women in science? The problems and the solutions around women's equality in science can be framed in different ways. I will opt for the simple cultural versus institutional categorization of the challenges we face. The cultural distortions work through stereotypes that characterize STEM subjects as more masculine. They hold girls back through subtle and explicit messaging, positioning girls as less able in science and math. We know for a fact that none of this is true. It is sheer cultural conditioning, cultural bias, and cultural convenience. These cultural artifacts from the past are as primitive and as harmful as denying basic education to girls because of their gender. These biases, stereotypes, subtle messages that are deeply ingrained in the social norms, codes, presumptions, expectations don't change fast. They are very inertial, but that is no reason for pessimism or inaction. I speak with confidence because I come from a society that has intentionally transformed its cultural codes pertaining to women with determination and persistence in early 20th century. One of the defining objectives of the young Republic of Turkey in 1923 was precisely to transform the cultural norms and perceptions that held back women in society. Women's rightful role in the most progressive social roles, from science to art, was politically encouraged, emphasized, and integrated into the emerging national pride. Today, women's role in Turkish society is still far from ideal, and there is much room for progress. However, what we accomplished so far is immense, especially in science and engineering. The percentage of Turkish female students in STEM subjects is among the highest in OECD. That is a remarkable result in a traditional society and is related directly to the transformational choices of our leadership. So cultural codes about women's role in science can be transformed, and cultural barriers can be overcome. I started with the difficult problem of cultural barriers to women's role in science and hopefully shared with you my optimism for progress. The institutional barriers that impede women's participation in science and engineering are easier to tackle than culture. For example, we talk about glass ceilings in corporations, or pay gap, or harassment in business. We set quotas for female board members. We force companies to commit to equal pay. We should do the same in academia. We need to look at how much funding goes to women researchers versus men. We need to challenge the culture of our academic institutions. Dear participants, now let me highlight an even more distressing dynamic that we cannot afford to overlook at this forum. All the cultural and institutional problems we discuss make sense when there is social order and peace. However, our world today is threatened by acts of terrorism that hinder peace and progress. Women and girls are especially vulnerable and targeted by terrorism. We face failed states, ungoverned spaces, refugee flows, and international terror across the world. when Syria collapsed, millions of girls and women refugees have fled the country. In Turkey, we do our utmost to provide basic facilities and education to almost 3 million refugees. But the reality is we are losing a generation of young Syrian girls and boys. When terrorist organizations control northern Syria, there is no hope that state order will return or that young girls will be given the opportunity to fulfill their potential anytime soon. Well aware of this dynamic, Turkey is now conducting operations to end terrorist threats from these sources. The world community must unite against terrorism, not only for the sake of peace and stability, but also for human rights, for women's rights. Ladies and gentlemen, one should not put the whole burden on our governments and recognize that civil society and NGOs has to step up to address the challenge. The social movement we've started 15 years ago, called Daddy Sent Me to School, with the support of Aydın Doğan Foundation, is a great example of how government and NGO and media, together with policymakers, can solve a social problem. Today, there is no gender gap between girls and boys in the 12 years compulsory education. It is our collective responsibility to give all girls and women the opportunity to fulfill their dreams in whichever walk of life they choose. Their self-actualization is also the wise path for our societies to benefit from their curiosity, creativity, and hard work. I am deeply grateful to the United Nations, to Princess Dr. Nesrin, and the sponsor members of the United Nations for convening this meeting where we can think thoroughly and in detail about the barriers we face. The challenge is not insurmountable, it just requires sustained hard work from all of us. Before I conclude, I want to declare our commitment as Aydın Doğan Foundation to work hand in hand with all partners to ensure gender equality and promote the participation of women and girls in scientific endeavors, not only in Turkey but globally. Thank you for the opportunity to address you in this timely and pressing debate.
Thank you, Ms. Hanzade Dogan-Boyner. The first commemoration of Women in Science Day was in 2016 during the Commission of Social Policy and Development, which was organized by RASIT and DESA. I'd like to welcome Ms. Daniela Bass, the Director of Division for Social Policy and Development. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for having invited me. It has been already, if I may say, a friendship that started 3 years ago with Royal Highness Dr. Nisreen El Hashemite. Thank you so much for various reasons, professional and else. So you're very dear to my heart as a person, and this topic is very dear to my heart as a professional and as a person. And thanks also to Royal Highness Zain El Hashemite, sorry about the pronunciation, who shared with me some of his passions. And it's always very nice to see not only very important people who are going to play a role in this society, already playing it, that have also passions. It's very important to have passions. And all those honorable people sitting around at this table, thank you very much. And also to the Republic of Malta for having invited me here today. 3 eyes. This is what I would like the division I have the honor to lead, the Division for Social Policy and Development in the Department of Economic and Social Affairs. Eye, one eye, second eyes, third one, eyes. But actually, I'm not going to talk about Oriental philosophies today. The 3 eyes I mean are I like inclusion. I like reducing inequalities. And the third I, impact. Now, I do believe that what you have been discussing here today, and you will go throughout the day and tomorrow as well, I believe, is meant to have an impact. And I really want to congratulate here the content of all the speeches, because it allows me not to strengthen what you already said in terms of remember, about those who are remembered and forgotten, about prejudices and barriers and stereotypes, about terrorism. I used to work in the field of, I wrote on behalf of the European Union years ago important publications about terrorism and anti-terrorism, and I do know how STEM, which means science, technology, engineering, and math can play in this field. So congratulations for all what you have said, but I would like to congratulate somebody else here. So far, what we have heard was mainly referred to women, adult women, in terms of the language we used and the content. I would like to embrace youth. I see so many young people here. So allow me to share with youth what we're trying to achieve here today and tomorrow with you. And thank you for having listened so carefully to such a difficult language. And yet, you were paying attention. Thank you. Now, youth, you see, is one of the focal points in the Department of Economic and Social Affairs that is, through the division I lead, the focal point for the whole United Nations system. The whole UN. It's a big family. So when we talk about inclusion, I would really like to hear what young people have to say about this topic. We're talking about them. But I would like to talk with them. I would like, yes, it would be.
The science panel tomorrow have their own, and please join them.
Thank you. This is fantastic. This is exactly what we want to achieve, to hear women and girls, or allow me, when I was called a child at your age, I was kind of offended because I felt I was a big woman. So you are little big women, okay? The same applies to boys. So you see, what we are discussing here today and tomorrow is to make some changes, right? And what adults call these changes, they're called policy and norms. You might wonder, what are they talking about? It's kind of solutions that you can bring to the attention of older people who might facilitate opening doors to you. Also in this organization, this is a very complex organization. Imagine a castle with 1,000 rooms. Wow, it can be confusing, right? So we can help you to go through all those floors and all those corridors and all those rooms to a beautiful garden. You are the beautiful garden. You tell us what plants you think we should plant there for the planet where you are going to be living, you're already living in, right? So your ideas, we can help you to transform them in policies, actions, impact, and in norms, things that regulate. You know, when you sit at the table, mother and father say, don't do this, do that, this is proper, that's not really proper. These are rules and regulations. We can help you to translate these rules and regulations in a language that is kind of complicated. But this is the language we speak here. And what we can do, we who work here in this space, in this organization, we can offer you a space. This is a beautiful space put at your disposal today and tomorrow. But then your ideas that we will help you to translate in policies and norms. So whatever is going to be the outcome document, what we adults call, then it has to find a space to be transformed in policies and norms. Now, me, as humble director of the Division for Social Policy and Development that supports two major organisms, subsidiary bodies, the Commission for Social Development and the Permanent Forum of Indigenous Peoples. I can try to humbly offer you the space where you bring all your ideas, and there we can discuss them and transform them in policies and norms. We are doing the same when it comes, for instance, to a specific group of young people and women in STEM, or they would like to be in STEM. Definitely, they benefit a lot of STEM. Women and girls with disabilities that are even more discriminated. Technology can enhance life of young women and girls and men as well. It's gender balanced. You see, you, women and girls in science and technology, etc., can really make sure that the world is good for everybody, men and women, or whatever gender we want to talk about. You can really have an impact. So I will stop here, just telling you there is a wonderful report prepared by the Secretary General about women and girls with disabilities, and the relevance science has also to improve health and well-being and education, and I could go on and on and on. And fun. It can be fun. It should be fun, right? So I spoke to youth now. Allow me if my language was a little bit more simple. If I haven't spoken about resolutions and stuff, I let that to others. And we would really like to have your energy, passion for the 3 I's. What are the 3 I's? Inclusion, reducing inequalities, and above all, impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Daniela Vaz. I'm sure I and everyone else will remember the 3 I's as we carry on with our lives. I have to completely agree with you. I hate it when people call me just a girl. You're good for your age, gender. You're good at chemistry for a girl. You're good at soccer for a girl. But then I stayed really strong for that, and that's how I got here today. And I thank everyone so much for supporting us youth. And on the topic of youth, I'd like to welcome 2 girls who are already change makers and leaders, and who are already inspiring so many. They are Talia Stemmer and Rebecca Yakogian, and they'll be welcoming our friends from Costa Rica, Maria Soli Rivera, and Gilda Maria Somoza.
Be the first girl in science speaking at the first International Day of Women and Girls in Science.
Günaydın, my name is Talia Özdemir. I am from Turkey and I live in Istanbul. I was honored to give the Girls in Science vision at the second commemoration of our day, the International Day of Women and Girls in Science. The number of girls... The number of girls attending and participating in this forum is increasing every year. My friend Rebecca and I will be co-chairing the first Girls in Science panel in United Nations history. Tomorrow, Rebecca and I will present you the outcome of our panel.
Ladies and gentlemen, this year, the Girls in Science vision will be delivered to you by our friends who came all the way from Costa Rica. Gilda Maria Jarquin Somoza and Maria Jose Salas Rivera, students at a professional and technical high school located in San Jose. Their major is computer networks. Maria Jose's major interests are mechatronics, astronautics, computer science, and nanotechnology.
Gilda Maria would like to pursue a career in artificial intelligence, astronomy, renewable energy, and computer security. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our friends Maria Rivera and Gilda Maria Somoza.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure and honor to be here with you today. My name is Maria Jose Solís Rivera. I am 17 years old and I'm from Costa Rica. Today, I want to be the voice of girls in science and technology. For a long time, we have fought for gender equality and we have achieved things, but still there is so much to do. Women are strong. We are the key players to achieve sustainable developments and peace. However, we still have to shout louder for the world to listen to us. When I was little, I did not fit with the rest of my friends. They played at being mom and I at being scientist. They dreamed about being princesses and instead, my biggest dream was to go into space. There are many girls with great potential who want to make a difference, but the world ignores their clamor. I have faith that the governments, businesses, and others will continue to make effort to step up for gender equality and gender empowerment. We want a better world where there is sustainable peace. But peace is not only stop wars caused by money or territory. It's not just stop using weapons. Peace is making everyone feel equal and give them the same rights and the same opportunities. If you are walking on the street and there is a girl who comes to ask you for help, who many will really help her? We don't know if the next great scientist or astronaut is going to be that girl who cannot study what she wants because the stereotypes stop her. Tell me, where is peace there? Science and technology are words of weight that we can perfectly carry and highlight. We are women and we are strong. We are women and we are powerful. We are women and we are unique. We are women and we like science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. We are women and we fight for what we want and dream. We are women and we're not going to stop. Who dares to stop us? Thank you for listening to my humble words. I come from a small country, but where the strength of women are great. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Hilda. I'm from Costa Rica. Today, we are gathered not only to celebrate the International Day of Women and Girls in Science and Technology. We are also here to remember that we still have the duty to continue fighting for the gender equality. We are fighting for a human right, which is provide the same development opportunities to every person, regardless of gender, creed, age, social status, and geographic location. We still have a long way to go in order to achieve development and harmony in the nation of our planet. Despite the efforts made by government, foundations, and organizations, and communities, we must work harder to achieve the Goal 5 of the Agenda Sustainable Development Goals. When gender equality exists, we are eliminating barriers and cultural and social prejudices, which allows girls and boys to pursue their professional aspirations and personal as well, but also those of the planet, to maintain the integrity of the natural resources, because this depends on women and men as much as men to be conscious of the social and environmental responsibility. So we need to improve the education for providing a better cognitive youth especially young girls in science like me, must see yourselves as owners, drivers, and beneficiaries of the Sustainable Development Goals of the 2030 Agenda. If we empowered, we can achieve great things and generate significant impact to change the world for our current and future generations. The equal participation of women and girls in science allows the development of our society, helps decreasing poverty, and education increases. From my perspective, I believe that science is a way to develop human ingenuity, to create, to discover, and solve problems in order to improve the quality of life for humanity. Because the greater the gender equality, the more advanced the country is. Through the reasonable use of science and technology, we can unite as a planet for the progress for all and all. We are one. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Talia Zdemir, Rebecca Jacosian, and of course, Maria Jose Soli Rivera and Gilda Maria Joaquin Somoza for coming from Costa Rica. Mr. Farouk Albaz, who is a moving space scientist who worked with NASA to assist in the planning of scientific exploration of the moon and the director of Remote Sensing Department at Boston University. He was a great supporter and advocate for women and girls in science, but because he's undergoing an operation, he's unfortunately able to join us today. He has sent us a video message.
Welcome to you all to the UN Third International Day of Women and Girls in Science. I'm very sorry that I cannot be with you today because I am very interested in the fact that women in science can do as much as men, and therefore this is a very significant meeting. The UN has always been impressed by parity in science and pushed for parity between men and women because women compose half of the society, and we must be able to get from them what is good for societies as they think and they study and they add to our knowledge. Significant contributions in science have come from women throughout history, from way back, from prehistory. I will just mention one example of Hypatia, the mathematicians of the Library of Alexandria in ancient times. And even in recent times, I would like to impress upon you all the story of Hidden Figures, the group of women, African Americans of that did all of the calculations for the orbits of the spacecraft before the Apollo missions to the moon. They were called by the men computers. Yes, they were computers, but they did a great job. So believe in yourself and believe that you can do as well as anyone else. Continue to gain knowledge because it is knowledge that gives you the self-confidence. And then try to impart that knowledge onto others because this is how we benefit society. I'm delighted that the UN and RASIT has brought you all here to benefit from each other and to continue to add to our scientific knowledge because this is what scientists should do. I wish you a wonderful meeting, and I hope that you will have great lives.
Thank you, Dr. Albaz. I encourage girls and boys to read more about Dr. Albaz and learn from him to be renowned in your field. Now, boys and girls, women and men must work together to achieve sustainable development. We're partners, not competitors. We need their support, and we need more of them to support their female colleagues. That is why I'm very happy to introduce now His Royal Highness Prince Zain Al Hashmi for his remarks on Y for X.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to begin by wishing all of you a good morning and a happy International Day of Women and Girls in Science. I'd also like to wish RASIT a happy 50th anniversary. Now, the Y for X movement. X and Y are the two human chromosomes that decide whether you're a male or female. Y being the male and X being the female gave me the idea to start a movement called the Y for X movement. And since we are celebrating the International Day of Women and Girls in Science, I thought this name was very appropriate. On this day, I would like to shed some light on one of the least appreciated professions around the world, teachers. The great majority of teachers are of the X chromosome, the most important being our mothers. They show us the way through life and help us accomplish our dreams. My first teacher was my mother. She taught me how to walk, she taught me manners, she taught me how to read, and she is still teaching me. Next came my school teachers. Starting from kindergarten all the way to 8th grade, they taught me basic life skills, how to add, multiply, and write. And I can only imagine what the world would be without teachers. In spite of the rapid advancements in science and technology, our world is still facing a shortage of science teachers. For example, in my school we have 4 science teachers, 2 of which are also certified English teachers. These 4 wonderful educators teach the respective grades, 5th, 6th, 7th, or 8th. That is 1 teacher for each grade. Now let's assume each grade has nearly 100 students. And there you go, class is full of students with only 1 teacher. The theme of this year's International Day is equality and parity in science. Inequality sometimes is not only in gender, but also in education. Besides the shortage of science teachers, there's also an inequality of education in different parts of the world, and I'm not only speaking about developing countries, also in developed countries. In many developed countries, the difference between an education in a big city and a rural area is extreme. Perhaps it is time we address this issue. If governments truly want to achieve the SDGs, they must value all teachers. This is why I encourage all women in science to teach at one point or another, so they can leave behind a legacy of educated students that have the power to change the world. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to invite all of my fellow Y chromosomes here today to stand with me and by way of applaud, pledge your support to all of the X chromosomes. It is now my pleasure to introduce to you Dante Schultz and Ishtiaq Mehdi.
Thank you, Your Royal Highness. My name is Dante Schultz, and I am a high school senior and associate producer at the New York Hall of Science, or NYSCI, where we produce short videos about science. Through NYSCI, I have also become a member of the International Community for Collaborative Content Creation, or IC4, where I collaborate with peers from 17 distinct locations within the United States, Finland, Namibia, Kenya, Mexico, and India. It is a privilege to work with these students, and through my participation in these programs, I've met many talented women who are passionate and driven to contribute to the science community. I think that the Y4X movement is important because it is necessary to teach young men and boys the importance of supporting women in order to form a truly progressive society. Also, in a lot of societies, men are the ones who have access to more resources to make change. If men are educated in ways to support women and their endeavors, they will be able to initiate change to ensure that we will see gender equality. I'm excited to attend today's event because I believe that there should be gender equality in STEM, because all people are deserving of equal opportunities and all people have the ability to contribute greatly to advance our society. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Royal Highness. My name is Ishtiaq Mehdi, and I'm also here as a part of NYSCI and IC4. I believe that gender equality is important in STEM because gender should not be a barrier for anyone, no matter what you want to do in life. In addition, the whole point of STEM is to gain and spread knowledge about the world and apply it. In order to accomplish this, we need to include everyone. My school is highly involved in STEM, and we have a 6-to-4 ratio of males to females. At school, I participate in robotics as well as computer science. I'm proud to say that I've worked on many projects with my female classmates, and I've learned a lot from them. However, I've seen that when I attend events outside of school, there seems to be a lack of women in them. I find this as a huge disadvantage to women as well as the whole STEM community. The more people we have solving problems, the better the chance of finding a solution. STEM doesn't care about whether you're a boy or a girl. STEM only cares about how much work you put into it. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. We're grateful that the number of stakeholders and number of people from different geographical areas coming to this conference has grown, and this demonstrates the growth of this collective concern and growth of this powerful movement. We must intensify our efforts and extend our reach, and we hope you'll take the results of this forum back to your country for further outreach and implementation. We, the girls, will have our first girls panel and will be presenting our recommendations tomorrow. On behalf of all girls, women, boys, men, and everyone, I thank the Royal Academy, the Government of Malta, the co-organizers, co-sponsors, and of course my ambassador, Mr. André Blanchard, for coming here to support me, and everyone here for supporting us and youth today. Now, I'd like to introduce someone very special, Mr. Nikhil Seth, who will chair and moderate for our next debate. He is the Executive Director of UNCTAD. I'd like to thank him, and I'm sure everyone here thanks him for his leadership and work with support from other UN agencies for the Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you for believing in the SDGs, thank you for your vision, and thank you so much for coming here today. Mr. Nikhil Seth. Thank you.
Good job.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies. We need to get started. Can you please take your seats? Can you please take your seats, ladies and gentlemen? We need to get started. Please settle down. We have a long list of people to hear, and we have a time constraint. Is there a hammer somewhere, a gavel? I could. Chatelaine? Chatelaine, give me the gavel, please.
Yeah.
Give me the gavel.
I think you need that.
Yeah. Let's continue now with our very distinguished panel. And before we start the panel, let me thank RASIT and Dr. Nisreen Al-Hashemite and, of course, the Honorable Dr. Elena Dali for the excellent work they've been doing. I've been part of this process now for almost 3 years, and I'm really amazed at the progress that we've made in the work that's being done here. Many of you raised the question of awareness, and it's remarkable how this whole project on awareness raising has moved forward. Awareness raising is the start of attitudinal and behavioral change, and the fact that RASIT and Princess Nasreen have committed so much in raising this awareness, and the fact that we are where we are today after 3 years is remarkable. But it's not only awareness, it's also looking at things which will make a difference. It's also looking at solutions by trying to capture them in outcomes, by saying this is what we are going to do through advocacy, through the media, through reaching out to educational institutions, through promoting what we need to do to encourage the participation of girls and women in STEM. I think RASIT and the effort that this process has garnered over these 3 years needs to be applauded and complimented. So congratulations for where you've reached and what you hope to do in the coming years. While being introduced, people referred to Agenda 2030. I'm very proud of what we managed to do 2 years ago to get 170 presidents and prime ministers to sign off on that agenda, which is a plan for humankind. It's a plan for getting to the world we want by 2030. Every part of that agenda, from poverty eradication to environmental issues, to social issues, to issues of sustainable infrastructure, of cities, science, technology, and innovation offer great hope for finding the solutions to meet the goals and targets in that agenda. But think of the human capacity that's needed to put more shoulders together to make advances on that. And one clear win is to engage more systematically women and girls in this, in imbuing the solutions for Agenda 2030 with their participation, especially through science, technology, innovation, and what are called the STEM subjects. So clearly, just in terms of numbers, if one was to look at how we're going to achieve Agenda 2030, the real capacity gap has to be met by women coming to the front in supporting the implementation of this agenda. I have lots of statistics here, statistics which point to the lack of success in many countries, especially I was surprised to see in the developed countries, and statistics to support what's happening in this area in the developing countries, which looks much more encouraging than what's been happening in large parts of the developed world. In the US, for example, there's been a decline in the last 30 years of the participation of women in STEM disciplines. And the opportunities now are greater than ever before, but somehow the numbers seem to be falling. In the developing world, the picture is much rosier, and the engagement of women is much more dynamic. On activities that we need to take with the media, on this advocacy side, on this awareness side, ways to start behavioral and attitudinal shifts which will make a difference to the world. Things are happening. And I'm so glad we have so many speakers today who are going to talk about the reasons why, how we should raise awareness, how we should advocate more on this subject, and also come up with concrete ideas for solutions to make this world more equal, especially in the subject we are dealing with today. But it's not all gloom and doom. And I just wanted to relate two of my very personal experiences, which points to a nicer trajectory which is in front of us. I'd gone to my country, India, and I talked to students in a poor school, a grade 10. It was a class of about 40 people, equally balanced between girls and boys. I had a conversation with each one of them. Most of the girls, I think almost all of them, wanted to either go into astrophysics or become neurosurgeons or go into medicine, while all the boys, roughly half that class, wanted to become chartered accountants or go into business. So the trend, at least as I saw in that poor school, was very different in the attitudes that the girls had there and the boys who were now entering the year when they were taking their exams to get into colleges. Then yesterday, my granddaughter, who's all of 3 years and a bit, came back from her preschool with two contraptions in her hand. One was a battery-powered robot. It didn't look like anything, but she said it was a battery-powered robot that she'd made in her school, and it actually worked. She pushed a switch, and there was a whirring sound, and it moved forward. And the other was a blender she had made with, of course, cardboard blades. But when she switched it on, it seemed to work. And the pleasure and thrill of that kind of discovery, that you can make things happen, that really endeared myself. That in preschools, if people in New York City, girls and boys, are finding the wonders of doing things by themselves in these fields, it portends wonderful things ahead. So I just wanted to share that. I didn't want to talk about all the statistics I have collected, all the studies I have collated, all the solutions I had put together. I'll distribute that because we are very time constrained and we have about 18 to 20 people who want to say something on this subject. So let me end my opening salvo there and turn now to the distinguished panel that we have. And in turning to the distinguished panel, what I'd like to request all of them and the subsequent list of speakers, because of the large numbers we have, please confine yourself to 5 to 7 minutes because we must finish by 1. And having said that, let me turn to the first person who's going to speak on our panel, the representative of UNCTAD here, Chantaline, who's going to read out a short message of the Secretary General of UNCTAD. Chantaline, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Nikhil, and good morning, everyone. It's such a heart feeling to see you all in this room to celebrate with us the third day of International Day for Women and Girls in Science, and to see so much interest and so much girls with us today. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of our Secretary General, Dr. Kitui, of the UN Conference on Trade and Development, because we've been saying UNCTAD, but a lot of people don't know what UNCTAD is. So it's the UN Conference on Trade and Development based in Geneva. That's why my Secretary General cannot be here. He's most unfortunately not able to join today, but he would like to reiterate how pleased we are to have been able to be partnering with RASIT, with our Royal Highness Nesrin El-Hashimit, who I am proud to call a friend as well as our colleagues and ambassadors from Malta, Costa Rica, Hungary, and Vietnam. It is a real honor and pleasure, and we have collaborated very closely to put this very successful event together in commemoration of the Third International Day of Women and Girls in Science. For us at UNCTAD, strengthening the abilities of countries to leverage science, technology, and innovation for the achievement of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development is an essential element of our mission as a development agency. UNCTAD is the focal point in the UN for the integrated treatment of trade and interrelated issues of finance, investment, and technology for development, thus our interests. We also provide a substantive backstopping to the UN Commission on Science and Technology for Development, Whereas the princess mentioned this morning, our government are deciding on policies for the science and technology innovation ministries back in countries to move forward on these agenda. As such, we make it a central point of our policy message to government and to the international community at large that success in harnessing science and technology for development will depend critically on success on bringing more women and girls in science, particularly but not only in developing countries, and focusing more and more science on their specific concerns and needs. And I'm very delighted that, as you've heard now, the youth panel, the young girl panel tomorrow will be putting together recommendation, and their voice will be brought to the Commission on Science and Technology in May and put into the mix of the recommendation for our policymakers on how to advance what type of skills young girls need to succeed in the digital world that we're living in. Understanding fully and addressing the gender dimension of science and technology should be a priority for those interested in making progress on Agenda 2030 through STI strategies. By applying a gender lens to different aspects of a story, one can consider obvious voices, but also the voices that are often missing, such as when we do pharmaceutical testing on women, toxicology, you have different impact on women, so you have to invite women at the table and into the decision-making. Applying a gender lens to science also to address the problem in climate change is also important because women get affected differently from climate change than men do. So what we are doing in terms of the work at UNCTAD is to look at it from 3 points of view and 3 entry points. One is science for women, which is about developing science and technology which supports women's development and livelihood activities, especially in developing countries. Women in science, which concern promoting gender equality in science and technology, which we're talking about here, and engineering, education, careers, and leadership. And then finally, 3, encouraging and supporting the role of women in innovation system and entrepreneurial development. The factors that explain why many fewer women than the world needs to go into STEM are many. In fact, to a large extent, the gender gap in science reflects the problem of career building which women face in all areas, not just in science. Some important are access to and quality of education, job markets, opportunities, stereotype, lack of role model, mentorship and sponsorship, workplace culture, and work-life balance issues. Therefore, the gender dimension of science and technology is an integral part of our program of work on STI. Our research in the field of STI policy is exploring how women can benefit from the globalization of science by fulfilling international collaboration opportunity like this one. We are a partner with several other agencies to try to also, including our colleague here, WIPO and ITU at this to fill the digital gap that we see happening between women and men, but also between rural and urban areas. Therefore, we are committed to chart a way forward in supporting inclusive and sustainable development that fully take into account the need of women, men, girls, and boys, and ensure that the talents in are able to contribute the fullest of their talent and ability. I thank you all, and I look forward to the recommendation coming. Thank you.
Thank you, Chantaline. Now I turn to the Minister of Higher Education of the Republic of Zambia, Honorable Professor Lu. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. I'll start by thanking the organizers for giving me this opportunity to share the participation of women and girls in science and technology. My country, Zambia, which is in Africa, maybe what I would say may be similar to many other African countries, in that the reasons why we have very few women and girls in science is basically due to socialization and stereotyping. When the girls are growing up, they are told to play with dolls, look pretty, and cooking pots. So they are supposed to take up the lighter careers, while the boys play with cars and bigger objects because they are going to be engineers and heavy-duty career progressors. Therefore, one of the things that is a big challenge for us is how we deal with this socialization. And this also translates to the fact that we have a big problem of child marriages, and Zambia has put up one of the most aggressive campaigns to eliminate child marriage so that girls can be retained in schools. But even when you look at our curriculum in the schools, it is very much a very colonial type of curriculum, which doesn't help the situation. And also, we do not have budgetary allocation and infrastructure that support science and technology per se. So what more when you are looking at those with a lower socioeconomic status, the girls and women? Furthermore, we do not have enough science teachers to be able to teach. And worse still, we have a media that believes in sensationalization more than reporting on serious issues. So these are our challenges that we have to continue dealing with. Therefore, as a country, what we have done is to put up policy framework that will support the participation of girls and women in science, starting from the recruitment into schools, into institutions of higher education, including universities. Even the scholarships, when they are being given out, we first of all look at whether it's 50-50, benefit the girls and men, and even much more, that all the girls that have applied to take up science subjects or subjects within the technology era must all be given scholarships. We are putting up a team of career promoters, and we are looking at role models in our society in science to be part of these career teams. I myself, as Minister of Higher Education, I'm a scientist. I'm actually a professor of microbiology and immunology. So I'm one of the good examples, and I give myself everywhere I am in the schools so that the girls can see me as a role model. But we have many other role models in the country. Recently, we actually established an Academy of Science, and where we expect to have a section dealing with women in science. And this particular academy has been given budgetary support to be able to do these activities. So my recommendation to this forum, first of all, is to get this whole celebration, International Day for Women and Girls in Science, get down to the national level so that this is celebrated worldwide, just like we celebrate 8th March, International Women's Day, because it's not known at unit level. Secondly, we need to actually have a paradigm shift, especially in the curriculum, so that the curriculum actually speaks to what we are saying in our country. We need to move away more from talking to action. And we have a picture in my country where the children are touching the president's mouth and saying, talk less, move to action, something that we'll be publishing every day in our papers. And we need to have a real revolution in our countries if we are really to achieve this whole issue of women in science. As I don't have much time, I think I'll end here, but just to say that a lot of our countries now have put a very high premium on science, technology, and also focusing on women and girls, because women are better achievers. And this is a fact of life that we all have to accept. I thank you.
Distinguished Minister, you're well within your time limit. In fact, there's a minute and a half to spare. So I thought I'd use that time to ask you a question. Because I met the Minister of Land and Mines from your country about 3 years ago, and he was complaining to me. He said, look, what I need are thousands of metallurgists. What I'm getting are graduates from the humanities. What can I do with graduates for the humanities, for the mining sector? And I was just wondering, over the last 3 years, have things changed? Are there more metallurgists now from engineering schools in Zambia? And has there been an upward trend also in the number of women engineers coming out of institutions in Zambia?
Thank you very much. I think when you met the Minister of mines. Then I used to be Minister of Gender. And I used my experience as Minister of Gender and the studies that we had done to look at women's participation in the various sectors of our country to take advantage of my current portfolio, where I've been for the last 2 years, to change things aggressively and less talking and more action. In fact, I've been accused in the country that because I'm a scientist myself, I've gone to the ministry and taken a bias to promoting science and technology. Even furthermore, that I've been biased to health because of my health background. But what I've been presenting here, how we are now examining how scholarships are given and ensuring that we look at our needs. We have had to do a needs assessment in the country, and it is true. Zambia is very rich in natural resources, including all the types of precious stones, minerals, and yet we didn't have what it takes. So what was happening is we were talking about investors coming from outside Zambia, and I'm trying to create a critical mass of investors within Zambia by ensuring that we train enough geologists, metallurgists, and so on. And we also have a lot of natural resources in the form of timber. So I'm trying to make sure that we train more people in that area so that when they see a tree, they do not see charcoal, which you cut down a tree and get $10 for cutting down that tree in charcoal, for them to see millions of dollars by being able to produce all the value additions of a tree. So these are the changes that have taken place in the last 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I think Zambia is fortunate to have a woman scientist who is the Minister for Higher Education. So thank you so much. Now I turn to Professor Nguyen Thi Hoang Nguyen, Vietnam's National Institute of Education Management. Distinguished Professor, you have the floor.
Thank you. Dear Excellency, distinguished guests, scientists, and all participants. It is a great honor, and I feel very privileged to be here to share with you our study on the Vietnamese women in science and technology. I'm going to share with you about some data, achievement, shortcoming, and some recommendation. But to making long to be short, I cannot give you the data, so I'm come up with some achievement. With regard to the science and technology, the number of female accounts for a high proportion and the figure increasing gradually from 2011 to 2015 from 41.6% to 44.79%. In education sector, the proportion of the female worker is 53.2. On university level, the proportion of the female professor qualified as Bachelor of the Arts is much more than the figure in the last 20th century. In science, many female researchers are director and academic research, both in terms of the aspect of the outstanding contribution to science and in terms of the application of their work in real-life situation. Many of them again awarded by prestigious associations in Vietnam and in the world. For instance, National Prize for Science and Technology, prize given by the Sofia Kovalevskaya Fund or L'Oreal UNESCO Fund. From 1985 to 2015, there were 44 outstanding individuals and 17 female researcher groups in terms of nature, science, and mathematics who received the Kovalevskaya Award. After being given these awards, they continue to achieve more and more. However, there are some shortcomings, such as the higher the qualification, the fewer the number of the female researchers. One of the most crucial reasons for this gender imbalance is the difference in the regulation of the retirement age between the women and men. with the woman age retirement being 5 years younger than the man. Study also shows that the longevity of the woman is higher than men. The rate of the disease after 50 years old in women is lower than in men. Moreover, women take career break to have children. The graduation for them to retire earlier than men is a waste of the female intellectual workforce. Some factors that affect the equality and parity in science for women. The policy, implementation of the training policy. There are no incentives for the female intellectual to take part in the training course, despite the fact that there are more difficulties for them to pursue education than their male counterpart, because of their responsibility in the family, their physical strength, and so on. In terms of the employment, in the report about the Vietnam employment trend in the year 2009, unemployed educated women rate are higher than men. Intellectuals in rural areas are most likely to be unemployed than in urban regions. Females with college degree are more likely to be jobless than women with higher education. The second is the gender issues. The society mindset of the looking down on the role of the woman lead to the consequence that women are not trusted, assigned, and promoted. Moreover, the role of the woman in family duty is considered to be natural. So their efforts in the family life are not recognized and respected. Then, psychology that people do not prefer working under the management of the female is also counted as a challenge for the woman. The factor from within each individual. Some female intellectuals, even people with a high level in education, are lacking of confidence, afraid of giving opinion, avoid sensitive policy issues, and unable to provide fully informed judgment on social issues. As a result, they prefer to stay in their comfort zone rather than strive to be better themselves. The responsibility in family. Women are more or less restricted by the traditional custom, spending a lot of time and effort in housework, caring for the elderly and children, and lacking time dedicated to professional work. The opportunity to explore the experience the world with double role in the family and in the career, it is difficult for women to study abroad or do research overseas. In summary, women must try hard in comparison with their male counterpart in terms of the physical strength, mental strength, and society prejudice to pursue their professional life to contribute to their intellectual capacity in society. Some solution and recommendation. For the long-term recommendation, the government should issue policy and guidelines that legalize gender equality in own occupation. Promotes communication and education about the gender equality in order for society, male as well as the female intellectuals themselves, to be aware of the importance for female intellectual role. Develop a specific mechanism to provide advantage for female intellectuals, such as setting up specialized sessions with the following responsibility: to boost gender equality awareness, to develop action plan for training, to find potential female candidates, to nurture talented women to become future leaders. Building a network of the women intellectuals on the national, regional, sector, basic, and so on, so that they can easily access important information and they have the environment to exchange ideas, professional knowledge, and experience to perform effectively in both daily life and professional career. Provide financial assistance for the psychological assistance, if necessary, for female intellectuals so that they can feel secure to pursue their professional life. Provide intensive or support for women intellectuals from ethnic minorities, religion, in remote areas where the proportion of intellectual women remains too low. So in my country, you know, the education accessibility between the boy and the girl in the minority is very imbalanced. So I recommend to, you know, give them equal opportunity to access education as beginning from the kindergarten. So later on they can have a more chance. Short-term solution. There should be a change in the age when the female intellectual retire. Currently, it is regulated that women 55-year-old will leave the workforce. So this inequality will cause a waste of intellectual capacity of those people. Prepare human resource and create opportunity for female intellectuals to take part in the National Assembly and the National Pupil Committee. Improve and change the supporting program for female intellectuals to sharpen their professional knowledge. At the moment, there is only support for the women to participate in the political science courses. There should be policy for the women to go abroad to study. In summary, investment in sustainable investment. The female intellectual is a part of the intellectual workforce. The quality of the female intellectual capacity is a key factor for the success in the industrialization, modernization, and international integration. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor, for both your analysis and the practical solution that you're recommending. You're absolutely right. There's so many headwinds in this struggle for greater equality. I'm in the learning and training business, and I know that the biggest obstacle to any change in attitude and behavior is how easily people forget what they learn. There's a 6-hour forgetting curve. So when people come to our training or learning sessions, within 6 hours they've forgotten what they'd come to train or learn. Culture, habits, attitudes, these are the most difficult to change. And of course, you've given some practical suggestions, including on things like retirement age and so on. But the basic battle has to be fought in minds of everyone. And I hope that's going to be a struggle. But these headwinds have to be pushed back. So thank you very much, Professor. I now turn to Professor Srimali Fernando, who's the chairperson of the National Science Foundation of Sri Lanka. Srimali, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your Excellencies, distinguished participants, I congratulate Her Royal Highness Dr. Nisreen El-Hashmi, Executive Director of the RASIT, and Honorable Dr. Helena Dalli, Minister of European Affairs and Equality of the Republic of Malta, along with other organizers and co-sponsors of the 3rd International Day of Women and Girls in Science Forum. And thank you for the kind invitation extended to Honorable Susil Premajantha, Minister of Science, Technology and Research in Sri Lanka, to participate. Honorable Minister sends his greetings and regrets his inability to be physically present at this important meeting due to commitments back at home. 70th session of the United Nations General Assembly in 2015 adopted Resolution 70-212 proclaiming February 11th each year as the International Day of Women and Girls in Science. Its sponsorship by 68 countries, with all member states approving, indicates the global interest in transforming our world through achieving equality and parity in science for sustainable development. Excellencies, distinguished guests, my country, Sri Lanka, was the first to introduce universal, for both men and women, adult franchise in 1931. Sri Lanka, which provides a free health service and free education up to undergraduate degree, has made remarkable progress in reaching gender equality, especially in health and education. The people of my country in 1960 elected Madam Sirima Bandaranayake as the first woman prime minister in the world. The 3rd chapter of our Constitution, which is on fundamental rights, provides a legal framework against gender discrimination. Despite all this, Sri Lanka ranks 109 out of 144 countries in the 2017 World Gender Report tabled at the World Economic Forum. Of the 4 pillars considered for the world ranking, Sri Lanka performs worst in economic participation and opportunity to women, which I shall briefly touch upon. The labor force survey carried out by Sri Lanka's Department of Census and Statistics highlights continued low female labor participation rates at 36%, compared with 75% for same-aged men, despite overall economic growth and poverty reduction over the past decade. This holds true for our research and development labor force, the highly skilled categories as well. Nevertheless, even to date, the female unskilled labor force contributes significantly to economic growth and is a major source of foreign exchange in our country. Although the proportion of women and men that qualify with bachelor's degrees from Sri Lankan universities is more or less equal, there is a sharp drop in women completing postgraduate degrees at master's and doctoral levels, mainly due to social and cultural challenges. The reluctance of women to study and work in engineering and IT fields is also a concern that needs to be addressed with a mindset change by including gender dimensions into STEM or possibly STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics education at all levels. Even women with higher level of education attainments find it increasingly difficult to secure high skills and highly paying jobs with very little opportunity to be involved in decision making on director boards, boards of management, statutory committees, etc. My institution, the National Science Foundation of Sri Lanka, launched a Women in STEM program last year to holistically address these issues. In this backdrop, I recommend this forum, through its outcome report, to encourage national governments to direct compulsory inclusion of women in each decision-making body, create girl, woman, and family-friendly learning and working environment, both in the government and private sectors, and integrate gender dimensions into STEAM education at all levels. As the world moves towards a knowledge economy, the economic and social activities will be driven by scientific, technological, and innovative capacities of countries and companies. In this new paradigm, the integration of women with enhanced skills into the talent pool is critical. The Global Gender Gap Report 2017 also reveals gender gaps at industry level, and in particular highlights that even though qualified women are coming out of education system, many industries are failing to hire, retain, and promote them, losing out on a wealth of capacity. Gender inequality is a pressing global issue with huge ramifications, not just for the lives and livelihoods of girls and women, but more so for the human development, national productivity, and GDP growth. A report published in 2015 by McKinsey & Company shows that advancing women's equality can add $12 trillion to the world economy by 2025. Therefore, the gender issues should be addressed not to patronize girls and women, but to empower them to address an imperative need of humanity. I'm sure the deliberations today and tomorrow will highlight this vital dimension of gender and science. And I wish this forum all success. I thank you.
Thank you for that, Professor Fernando. It was good to hear your experiences from my part of the world. Let me pass the floor now on to Mr. Bruno Lefebvre. He's a statistical analyst at the Economics and Statistics Division of WIPO, and I hope he'll be able to give us a statistical snapshot view of what's happening in the world, both globally and, of course, in a more country-specific, more regional context in this whole area that we're talking about today.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Indeed, I would like to present you a PowerPoint presentation that's coming in a minute. And it will show you a brief overview on the recent research that WIPO has done to identify the women participation in intellectual property. Next slide, please. WIPO is a specialized agency of the United Nations, which is based in Geneva, and it is a global forum for intellectual property. And it has gender balance within its mandate since 2014. In 2015, WIPO's gender and diversity specialist, Mrs. Kari Sato, and the Economics and Statistics Division have started a research to identify the gender of inventors named in international patent applications. At first, we had to create a worldwide gender name dictionary that now contains more than 6 million names, valid for 182 countries. And thanks to this dictionary, we could identify the gender of more than 96% of all inventors named in international patent applications. What I understand here with international patent applications are patent applications filed in the international phase of the Patent Cooperation Treaty. And since 2016, WIPO has mainstreamed gender statistics in all its statistics report. I would like now to present you some of our key findings. Starting with the number of international patent applications that list at least one woman inventors, that we've estimated to nearly 71,000 in 2016. But more interestingly is to look at the trend, this increasing trend over this 15 years period. A specialist of the PCT system will likely say that the overall number of international patent applications has also sharply increased during this period. So it's certainly interesting to look at the proportion of international patent applications with women inventors out of the total. And this is this graph here. And you see again an increasing share, an increasing trend over time. And this is an excellent news because it basically says that international patent applications with women inventors increase at faster pace than international patent applications. So this is really a good news. But if you look at the shares in themselves, you see that in 2002, slightly more than 20% of all applications listed women inventors, rising to 30% in 2016. That's quite low shares. If you think 30% in 2016 means that nowadays more than the 2/3 of all international patent applications filed list only men inventors, not a single woman inventor. You can see on this slide here that shows again the share of international patent applications with women inventor, but this time by region, that for each of the region in the world there's relatively low share. With Latin America and the Caribbean, North America and Asia that are above average, but up to 2 percentage points above average. And below average, you have Africa, Oceania, and Europe. But what is very interesting and very encouraging that you can see from this graph is that in each of the geographical regions in the world, there has been an increase in share over the past 2 decades. And this indicates that even though there is a large gender gap among inventors, there's a clear trend toward more equality. And this for each of the regions in the world, even though obviously we are far from gender balance. This graph shows you now the same, again, the share of international patent applications with women inventors, but by field of technology, the field of technology of the invention. And it basically shows here that applications filed or inventions made in the area of life science, such as biotechnology or pharmaceutical, have much higher share of women inventors than applications filed in mechanical engineering, for example. You will be able to find all these indicators and much more in our main statistics publication called the World Intellectual Property Indicators. We brought some paper copies for you there next to the entrance here. And my colleagues from the WIPO office in New York also kindly printed last year's special theme of this report that provides a comprehensive analysis on the women participation in international patenting. Just note also that you can free to use our worldwide gender name dictionary also. In late 2017, we have started new research to explore further intellectual property data, and we would like to identify now the gender of trademark holders or creators named in industrial design applications. And we would like to have some of these new data available for April 26, 2018, because this day is the World Intellectual Property Day. And this year, the World Intellectual Property Day will focus on powering change, women in innovation and creativity. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bruno, for all that analysis. And your message is quite clear that things are not bad as they seem, but they should move much faster if we are to move towards equality at as rapid a pace as the world is shouting for. So clearly much more needs to be done. Now I'm turning to Ursula, who is the ITU representative to the United Nations. Ursula, I remember you had a World Radio Congress, wasn't it, 2 years ago? And if I recall the statistics, out of the 1,200 national delegates who came, less than 10% were women. And in fact, we tried to do a learning session for the women delegations who came to the World Radio Conference to try and impress upon the women who were participating the importance of getting onto leadership positions, the importance of being more present despite their small numbers in the key decision-making processes and the whole issue of mentoring. Your next radio conference should be around the corner in a year or so. How are you seeing things change? Is it getting better? And are you hoping to move beyond that 10% of delegations, women delegates who came at the last? I know these are not in your hand, but what are the trends that you see?
Thank you very much, Chair, and also to RASIT and our other wonderful hosts today for the invitation to join this panel and for bringing us all together on this theme, which is so vital to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. I'm going to speak about an area of science, technology and innovation which has unfortunately seen among the least progress to date at significantly increasing the numbers of women and girls involved, especially in employment and leadership roles in the sector. I'm speaking of information and communication technologies, ICTs, commonly known as tech. And with the world becoming ever more digital, we really need to work together to turn this around. I'm from the ITU, as was mentioned, the International Telecommunication Union, and we're the UN specialized agency for ICTs, and we're really committed to connecting the world, of which currently still 3.9 billion people are not yet online. Agenda 2030 recognizes that the spread of ICTs and global interconnectedness has great potential to accelerate human progress, to bridge the digital divide, to accelerate, to develop knowledge societies. And yet the global gender digital divide is actually growing, despite consensus among governments and others that addressing it is a key priority. We have Sustainable Development Goal 5 of the Agenda 2030, which set the goal of achieving gender equality and empowering all women and girls, including ensuring women's full and effective participation and equal opportunities for leadership, and enhancing the use of enabling technology, in particular ICTs, to promote the empowerment of women. In December 2015, there was an action plan to close the digital gender gap, which was launched at a side event on women's empowerment in the digital age. And it focuses on a few key areas where we really need to take action. The first is to develop gender-responsive strategies and policies, and to ensure access to ICTs by women and girls, and mitigating or responding to the threats online that hinder women's access to use of technology. The third is to build digital capacities of girls and women and support development of content, applications and services that meet women and girls' needs. Fourth is promoting women in the technology sector into positions of decision-making, like you mentioned, Chair. And fifth is to establish multi-stakeholder partnerships to advance women's empowerment within the information society and strengthen international cooperation. As with all the goals and targets in the SDGs, the achievement of actions such as these will require unprecedented levels of cooperation and collaboration and finding new, more effective ways for us to work together. Thus, in 2016, the ITU, together with UN Women, ITC, GSMA, and UNU, created a global platform to facilitate coordinated and collective action to close the gender digital divide. It's called Equals, and I invite you to visit equals.org. It's a global network delivered by a committed partnership of UN entities, corporate leaders, governments, academic and civil society organizations around the world, working together to bridge the gender digital divide by bringing women and girls to tech and tech to women and girls, and in so doing, seeking to improve the lives of millions worldwide. So let's work together to make this a reality. Why is a global network needed to bridge the gender digital divide? It's because of statistics like the following. There are 250 million less women online than men. There are 200 million less women than men who own a mobile phone. Currently, only 6% of app developers are women. Imagine all the amazing apps we could have if we had many more women app developers. 90% of the Silicon Valley tech jobs are currently held by men, and companies run by men there got more than 16 times the funding that companies run by women there got. Men also hold 4 out of 5 of the senior roles at tech companies at the moment. And in many countries, while the number of women graduates in other areas of science has increased, the percentage of women graduates in computer science has actually fallen since 2000 in many countries, or remains at a low level despite a modest increase. So a message to young women here: there are many opportunities for you in tech. We need you. As a result of statistics like these, we're collectively missing out on so much that greater diversity and inclusion in the tech sector would bring. We need more women as creators and not just consumers of technology. Tackling the gender digital divide in access, skills, and leadership would make companies and economies more successful too, as well as to address inequality. For example, if an additional 600 million women and girls came online in the next 3 years, GDP across 144 developing countries could be boosted by up to $18 billion. And the World Economic Forum Global Gender Gap Report 2017 suggested that improving gender parity may result in significant economic dividends, which vary depending on the situation of different economies and the specific challenges they're facing. But just to offer a couple of examples, they predicted that the GDP of the UK could add an additional $250 billion, and that the GDP of Japan could add $550 billion. And for the world as a whole, $5.3 trillion by 2025 if we close the gender gap in economic participation by 25% over the same period. And then on the company side, research overwhelmingly shows that a gender-balanced boardroom and diversity in teams delivers better results. And a move from no female leaders to 30% has been linked to a 15% boost in net revenue margin for companies. ICTs form the backbone of today's digital economy and have enormous potential to fast-forward progress on the SDGs and improve people's lives in fundamental ways. And the pace of technological change in ICTs has been speeding up, risking the digital divides become digital chasms unless we act today. For Equals, we've mapped hundreds of initiatives so far that address issues of ICT access, skills and leadership for women and girls around the world. And doing so has already helped to raise awareness of which organisations are doing what and where, providing a stronger foundation for us all to work together. And it's also yielded valuable insights, such as that more than a third of the initiatives currently focus on skills building, and that initiatives on mentoring, awareness raising and advocacy are underrepresented, and that also that initiatives tend to be concentrated in certain countries, while many countries don't have many initiatives currently at all. Many initiatives also share challenges in common, including a lack of actionable data and funding. And these challenges can be addressed more effectively through joining forces, sharing information and lessons learned about what works and what doesn't, collaboration and coordination, such as through the Equals Network. Among other things, digital inclusion of all people, women and men, wherever they are, for social and economic development will require comprehensive national digital inclusion policies, strategies and guidelines, including for digital skills development, and sex-desegregated data is needed for targeted programs and progress. So in conclusion, the ITU congratulates RASIT and thanks you again for bringing us all together today on the crucial theme of women and girls in science, which is so needed to make a difference for women and men, girls and boys, families, communities, societies, and economies. Thank you.
Thank you, Ursula. You made a truly compelling case for the importance of bridging this gender digital divide and the impact such a bridging of this divide can make to the economy, to society. It's good economics, it's good for society, it's good probably for the environment and good politics too. So I hope we can do much more in this area. So ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, young adults, boys and girls, you've heard this side of the floor. We've had some interesting perspectives of progress and difficulties from 3 countries, from Vietnam, from Zambia and from Sri Lanka. You've heard, you've got a statistical snapshot view of how we are doing and not progressing fast enough, but doing relatively okay. It's not all gloom and doom. And you've heard on the digital divide and from UNCTAD and the Commission on Science and Technology for Development. So now I'm shifting back to the floor, and I do have a list of speakers, and I start by giving the floor to the Permanent Representative of Colombia to the United Nations, Her Excellency Maria Emma Mejia Velez. You have the floor, Excellency.
Gracias. Thank you so much. I think we couldn't be in better hands than yours, Nikhil said, Executive Director of UNITAR, because you've done quite a lot here inside this house of the UN. I think for us, ambassadors, is very moving to be here. I mean, the first panel we had, the installation of this event with, on the hand of Her Royal Highness Princess El Hashemite and all other authorities that open, particularly the girls and boys, was very moving. And as you know, this is not a place for applause. and we have had quite a big hand of applause today. So I'm very happy to see that this is an issue that touches people and that worries people, young and old, inside the house and outside the house. I think the last two statistics that you presented, the one on how we are achieving by regions, I mean, we have 30, Latin America and the Caribbean, but still, I mean, it's so worrisome. And your statistics, I mean, to know that 250 million less women than men are connected, or only 6% of app are sort of created by women. So that is something to be worried about. And I wanted to place a comment that it was said here. We need in the declaration the political will. It's not only governmental will, but also private sector will. I see from the Secretary General Guterres. As you know, maybe you have heard, I chair a group called the Group of Friends for Gender Parity at the UN. It was initially created in order to promote women to become secretary generals, at least to be candidates. And we indeed achieved it. We had 7 out of the 13 women for the very first time candidates to become secretary general. We didn't reach it, but we have a feminist, which is Antonio Guterres, as our SG. And he has done something extraordinary. But to give you the statistics, doing such an effort, he achieves this year, 2018, he did achieve already in 1 year, announced that for the first time in history, parity was reached in senior management groups at the United Nations, 23 women and 21 men among the leading UN secretariat. That is to say, those that he can choose. He doesn't have to have permission from member states or candidates from member states of his own choosing. But 2021, only in 2021, he will reach parity among undersecretaries, assistant secretaries, and special envoys, or SRSG, what we call Secretary General's envoys for missions, political missions, and that. And only in 2028, 2 years before we finish Agenda 2030, that we should have achieved that number. In 2028, we have the target that at the whole of UN system, we will have parity. And that is those are jobs that particularly don't require, this field of science, technology, I mean, a very specialized field of training. So the job is, my first message is the political will. I mean, this is a decision that we women and men have to take. We here, for example, do small steps. So no panel will have more men than women. So we try to have, I mean, today is fantastic. We have so many women. But, I mean, try to have gender, try to give spaces to others, to young people. And I think that is making an impact, a considerable impact. For us, Minister, I was very encouraged by your message from Zambia. We, coming from Colombia, a country in conflict for 5 decades, where this year, this is like the first panel we have on women and girls in preparation to March 8, and then in preparation to the Commission on the Status of Women that begins on the 12th of March, that this year, the CSW, which is, you would see this house full of women, indigenous, minorities from all over the world coming to speak about the rurality, the rural women. And there, in your country probably, and in Sri Lanka as well, and in my country, the gap between, now is not only the gap of developing and developed, but the gap between the rural and the urban that you talked about as well. So that gap, how are we going to handle that gap, particularly in conflict? And the answer is education, as Gabriel Garcia Marquez, the Nobel Prize winner, the Colombian Nobel Literature Prize winner, said, with education from the cradle to the tomb. So all your life, education has to be something that we really think early childhood has to be something that will make the difference in our countries. If a girl is born poor, she's in Latin America, she's likely to die poor unless she has education. unless she has tools to defend herself. So my message would be, thank you very much. Colombia will be there. We will be signing the outcome document and pushing it. And already 3 years is making a tiny history. So we have a tiny history there. And help us in the UN to fulfill and to achieve these statistics that hopefully will help, particularly in peace and security in the field, where it's a domain of men in troops particularly. So help us achieve that gap quicker than later. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Maria Emma, for those wonderful words. And I cannot but at this moment publicly acknowledge what you have personally done in what are now, at least after Agenda 2030, the 5 pillars of the work that we do on peace, on prosperity, for our planet, for our people, and all in a spirit of partnership. You've been instrumental in leading this charge, despite all kinds of political things which sometimes block progress here. But thank you so much for everything you have done, Ambassador. Now I turn to Ambassador Ellen Agladze, the Deputy PR of Georgia to the United Nations. You have the floor, Madam.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. It is indeed a great pleasure to participate in the 3rd International Day of Women and Girls in Science, and I do thank all the panelists for their excellent presentations. Despite some progress in recent years, achieving equality and parity in science remains an important challenge. Although today women are in the mainstream of science and many of them are part of research groups of prominent and breakthrough scientific discoveries, there is still a long way to go to achieve equality and parity in science policy. And if we are to be successful in science and achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, we certainly have to bring women and girls to the forefront by undertaking science policy measures that foster women and girls' empowerment and support their engagement in different scientific fields. This will pave way to address the challenge of underrepresentation and underutilization of the potential of women scientists in the research field, especially in hard sciences or the STEM, which still unfortunately remain predominantly male-dominated. Ensuring equal participation of women and girls in sciences requires gender-responsive policy framework on the one hand and promoting educational programs first and foremost to encourage and inspire girls to take up science careers and break free from deeply rooted beliefs and historical stereotypes about science and technology being predominantly masculine. Georgia at policy level has a 5-year gender-responsive education and science strategy framework in line with the SDGs, and one of the core priorities in that regard is provision of STEM education at all levels of education and research. Georgia is committed to the policy of ensuring the gender equality and parity in science through providing funding opportunities for male and female researchers on an equal basis without discrimination. And this is demonstrated by female-dominated management of the National Science Funding Agency and is reflected in the relevant statistical data. When it comes to the ratio of female researchers' participation in calls under different research programs announced by our National Science Foundation, Georgian female researchers are on an equal footing with their male counterparts. According to the statistical data for the year 2015 and 17, the Georgian Science Funding Agency administered up to 21 programs wherein 1,200 researchers participated, and basically the parity was achieved. Almost half of them were women. Let me also mention one of the programs. Since 2015, 3 leading Georgian higher education institutions in cooperation with San Diego State University started offering internationally accredited bachelor's programs in STEM fields, which quickly became very popular among STEM students in the country, and at this point 30% of them are researchers are women. Smart communication strategy played a decisive role in attracting more girls in this program. First, we try to use science communication for reaching out to general public with a view to raise their awareness about STEM field and tell the success stories about the world's top female scientists in STEM fields, as well as success stories of local Georgian female researchers. We tell these stories through organizing various events, video, poster, topic competitions, workshops, and other events. And all these measures contribute to raising awareness about the importance and potential of women and girls in science. And Georgia will continue these efforts to achieve the effective empowerment of women and girls in science. I thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Ellen. Can I now turn to Professor Hina Chowdhury, who is a professor of medicine at Mount Sinai, New York. And I would just urge the rest of the speakers that we are very time constrained. We have about 26 minutes to finish a large number of speakers. I think there are 8-9 speakers. So, and I also wanted to say that my ability to moderate will be judged only if we can finish on time or not. So please try to be as economical with the use of words as possible. And with that general advice, can I pass the floor on to Professor Hina Chowdhury?
Very much, Mr. Chair. I want to thank Her Royal Highness Princess Nasreen and the RASIT organization and the organizers at this extremely needed United Nations conference. I had the honor and privilege of speaking a few years back when Her Highness had organized a Women in Science Day here at the United Nations. And at that time, I presented research from my laboratory. Today, I'm not going to actually present hard science, but I'm going to relate a story about what women in the trenches doing science actually encounter. It's a rather shocking story. I've lived through a number of nightmares trying to be a woman scientist. I'm actually a physician scientist. And I had started my career here in New York almost, I think, more than 15 years ago. I had arrived after all Ivy League training from undergraduate through my cardiology fellowship from MIT and then Harvard, and then I had done my clinical training in cardiology at University of Pennsylvania, and I came to Columbia University to be both an instructor in the Department of Medicine and to do a postdoctoral fellowship in genetics and developmental biology. I felt as a cardiology fellow that the next horizon for treatments in cardiovascular medicine had to be in the molecular biology area, and I needed further training. So I trained with an amazing woman mentor, a professor of genetics and developmental biology, Deborah Wolgemuth at Columbia University. I spent 10 years as both instructor and then Florence Irving assistant professor at Columbia University before I was recruited to my current institution as associate professor with tenure. That was on my contract anyway, and to direct a new program in cardiovascular regenerative medicine. I brought with me $4.5 million in research funding. And you probably know that for a beginning associate professor, $4.5 million of research funding is a very substantial amount. I was the only woman faculty member in the Institute for Cardiovascular Research at Mount Sinai. I had brought with me intellectual property, so I was very happy to hear the statistics on intellectual property today. I had spent 10 years at Columbia refining a technique of gene therapy to deliver to the heart to induce regeneration of cardiomyocytes, cardiac muscle cells, in the diseased heart. Mankind has not, to this day, solved this problem. I have published a paper recently in the porcine model, which mimics the human heart, that this is possible, this is achievable, and now I'm working with pharmaceutical companies and venture investors to develop this and test this in human clinical trials. When I brought this technology with me from Columbia and an independent grant from the NIH to carry forth my research and an agreement from my current institution to test my therapy in large animals, because Columbia did not have a large animal laboratory. So before I can get into human, I have to test it in large animals. Lo and behold, the first 2 years I'm treated like, I'm a celebrity at Mount Sinai, and my therapy was starting to work, and it was showing all the male scientists in my department that my therapy is working in the pig model, which means it's going to be extremely promising in humans. Before I know it, less than 2 years into my associate professorship, my director of my cardiovascular institute had, without my knowledge, lifted my confidential data. My R01 support from the NIH was copied word for word in a multi-center $17 million grant he submitted under his name. The day I found out, I could not come out of my office. I could not open the door. I could not even speak to my secretary. I did not want to speak to a single laboratory staff member of mine. My students, my postdocs were outside my door wondering all day whether I would ever come out of that room.
The first person I called was my mentor at Columbia, Dr. Deborah Wolgemuth. She very specifically said to me, you cannot let them get away with this. Absolutely not. So first I met with my chairman. I met with him 7 times. He promised to help me. After 7 meetings, he had not helped me. He was not going to throw his rainmaker under the bus. It was me, the more junior person, who would be thrown under the bus. So then I went to the dean. I had 3 meetings with him. He did not help me. Then I had hired a lawyer. Fortunately for me, I had grown up in a relatively affluent family. I had the funds to hire one of the smartest and one of the most expensive lawyers in this town. And you know how good they are. So after 4 years of paying my lawyer $600 an hour, I was able to retrieve my intellectual property to my name, published my paper in Science Translational Medicine with me as corresponding author, with no mention on my institute director who had never contributed 1 iota of either intellect or research funding to those results presented in that paper. So this is the story of what happens to women scientists. At such a senior level, as associate professor with $4.5 million in my research bank, this could happen to me. My chair and my dean turned against me because I reported their golden boy to the NIH. So I was asked to talk to you about how governments can protect women scientists. It was the NIH that came to my institution that investigated this and made him take all reference to my work out of his grant and only allow me to publish that topic. This is how my government protected me. But there is a better way my government could have protected me. My government could have taken away all of his NIH support and made sure he can never do science again. They did not go that far. Why? And this is an important teaching point for every woman scientist who applies for federal funding in this country, and these laws may be relevant in other countries as well. If you collaborate with somebody, the NIH will not pursue that person for scientific fraud if you have been a collaborator with them. They are able to lift your words and your preliminary confidential data without being pursued for scientific misconduct, and I did not know this. So it was the Office of Grants Mismanagement that investigated this, and they made him take all of my work out of his grants, but he did not get fired. He is still working there because he had been my collaborator, and he knew this. He knew the fine print, that if he pretended to collaborate with me, he would get away with this. So this is the story I have for you, and my recommendation is that every government funding agency in every country protect women scientists and have these men fired, take away all of their research funding. They should not have the privilege to do science because, face it, we women are smarter. Thank you.
Thank you for that story, Hina. We are, I'm sure each one in this room is shocked by that story. And of course, I'm not sure how many $600 an hour lawyers are present in this room, but at least you have our full emotional support for your struggles ahead, because it never ends, and these struggles continue and will continue. But at least this room is behind you, and we wish you the best in going forward with all the wonderful work that you're doing.
Thank you. I hope that's the case tomorrow when my institution tries to fire me.
Can I now turn to Ms. Oksana Pizik, who is from the University College of London, and she's going to talk about advancing women in science global leadership.
Time. We'll start again. Thank you, Mr. Moderator, for your kind introduction. Your Highness, Excellencies, Honorable Ministers, and fellow panelists, it is my great honor and privilege to address all of you here today at the United Nations headquarters in New York to celebrate the 3rd International Day of Women and Girls in Science. From a vision to reality, from a dream to a resolution, Her Royal Highness Princess Nasreen Al Hashmite has lifted women and girls in science everywhere by marking February 11th our official internationally observed UN Day, a truly crowning achievement. Thank you to RASIT, the UN, and partners for bringing global action and attention to female scientists as leaders in solving some of the world's most complex challenges. I ask you to imagine, what would the world look like if we tapped into the full potential and power of women across the globe? How much more could we, men and women, achieve if we worked together, harnessing the previously underused and overlooked talents? It is global forums like this that bring together world leaders and future leaders in science, politics, the private sector, and academia to envision such a future. It starts at home. I'd like to dedicate my speech to my earliest inspiration and my greatest champion, my mother, Olena Pejic, who tragically passed away in 2009 from breast cancer. She was a very tough teacher and a fierce believer in the power of education to transform lives. She is the very reason I am proud to call myself a pharmacist, lecturer, and woman of science. Every girl and every woman has the right to fulfill their God-given potential according to each of their individual talents, hard work, and imagination. The expectant, untapped human, intellectual, and financial capital is unfathomable. It is paramount that this generation finish what the suffragettes and other gender equality activists brought into the mainstream for the benefit of all humankind. This week marks the 100th anniversary of British women winning the right to vote, and as such set the stage for a century of change in Europe and the rest of the world. Yet there is still no one country that has achieved real gender equality, and too many more countries where women still lack fundamental human rights. While certainly some progress has been made, we see gaps widening in other areas. According to the most recent World Economic Forum report, the most challenging gender gaps remain in the areas of income and health. Given the continued widening of the economic gender gap, it is now not to be closed for another 217 years, not in my lifetime nor my children's lifetime. Presently, the world faces many potential catastrophic challenges. We need science, from climate change to the unprecedented rise of superbugs and the now looming crisis of antimicrobial resistance, which threatens to take us to the dark ages of medicine before the advent of chemotherapy or surgery, because they will not be safe without effective antibiotics. We need science to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, and we need women in science to apply their brain power, gifts, and grit in blazing new paths to new solutions. We need women in science. We can no longer afford to waste so much human potential for scientific discovery. Gender equality can be a solution for the lack of competitiveness in discovery research. We can increase the odds of discovering, say, a cure for cancer by increasing and retaining the talent pool, achieving greater gender equity and excellence in research. Yet across the UK, we see 1 in 3 universities going backwards on female professorships, with the worst statistics in STEM. And this is in spite of the very gender initiatives that are meant to drive this change, the Equality Challenge Charter. As this shows, policy alone is not enough. We need women leaders in science. Lack of visibility in leadership has knock-on effects on the number of women pursuing careers in the STEM field. These imbalances ultimately cost women leadership opportunities, sidelining them out of decision-making at the highest levels of science and policy. What people may think of as science problems actually affect everyone, men, women, and children. And what science solves actually is largely determined by who is leading the scientific inquiry. Without women's leadership, direction, and vision in science research, its gains that benefit everyone are lost. For example, we know countless women with heart disease have been misdiagnosed in emergency rooms and dangerously sent home, because we did not know then that women may exhibit different signs and symptoms of heart attack. And yet cardiovascular disease is the #1 killer of women, more than all of the forms of cancer combined. We need women in science to be celebrated. Only 9 in every 100 awards in public health and medicine is attributed to a woman, despite making up the majority of the healthcare workforce. We need more women voices and achievements to be recognized and celebrated in the public sphere. If we don't address gender biases in health awards, women will remain stuck in a cycle. They will not receive awards because of their lack of representation in leadership positions, and their lack of awards will limit their advancement towards those very same leadership positions. It is my recommendation to the panel that measures to reduce gender bias in this sphere could possibly include establishing an award for gender parity and in the sciences, and that this could be awarded annually on the International Women and Girls in Science Day. This gender parity award would be based on the processes and the policies in place in selection criteria, including gender diversity and equality. Science has been one of the greatest liberators of women in history, and I believe women in science will topple the remaining inequalities, driving this social change alongside partners in government and the United Nations, and in doing so, redefine the very nature of leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Oksana. And I'm now turning to Dr. Stephanie McGowan of the Felician University, and she's going to talk to us about the evolving role of women and leadership.
Good afternoon. It is indeed a great honor to speak before you today regarding the importance of promoting girls and women in science. Proudly, I serve as Dean of the School of Education at Felician University. In that role, I am charged with recruiting inspired young people poised to enter the profession of teaching, a role that has historically been dominated by women. The role of teacher, a sacred and trusted visionary who imparts knowledge in a way that makes learning relevant, exciting, and necessary, has become an essential ingredient in the recruitment and retention of young girls and women in science. Time and time again, both girls and boys are enchanted with the excitement of science in primary school, and yet as they progress into secondary education, for young girls and women, their love and passion dwindles, and the inequity of those continuing in the field of science begins. According to a 2013 article in the New York Times, Why Are There So Few Women in Science?, the author expresses that the greatest reason for the disparity of girls pursuing STEM in the United States beyond middle school is due to the variables such as exposure, encouragement, and relevancy during their formative years. It is then further exacerbated by the resources of the communities in which they live in, and even greater influenced by their ethnicity. Universities such as Felician, who are committed to providing an outstanding post-secondary education to first-generation college students stemming from some of the most financially challenged communities, must find creative ways to support our young people who wish to pursue STEM, areas knowing that they were not given resources or foundational knowledge in their formative years, but have the desire and the will to work toward achieving it. By providing opportunities in both the natural and social sciences, we continue to push the boundaries at Felician that enable programming that our students see as responsive to the issues that our communities face and to become necessary agents of change. It is in that spirit today that I proudly share that Felician University will be launching the International Center for Autism and Disability Research and Education in the coming months. This center allows for the focused scientific research such as eye tracking of infants for early detection of autism, and while promoting the social science dissemination of best practices, support for families, development of intervention, and policy advocacy. For me, the center and committed vision of Felician University to promote respect for human dignity, compassion, and transformation call upon another role that I serve in when thinking about how much more enriched the field of science would be with greater presence of women.
The role is the most basic and traditional role women play around the world, and it is the role of mother. As a parent of 12-year-old twins, my son is diagnosed with Down syndrome, and my daughter is diagnosed with autism. How I saw the world and the importance of science in it changed immensely. I crossed over from the role of inspiring future scientists as an educator and teacher to becoming a strong voice for the need of new science interventions and research in the role of advocate for my children and for the members of my community who are disabled or uniquely abled. Finding scientific interventions to address the phenomenon of autism spectrum disorder, which currently impacts approximately 1 in 68 children in the United States, also has extraordinary financial impacts on our global economy. According to the U.S. Center for Disease Control, the average yearly cost of medical care, special education, schooling, and loss of parental work productivity for children and adults diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder was close to $60 billion. Who better than the women of our global society, the natural caretaker and the giver of life, to champion the change that will benefit the very core of the family, our children. As women, we must also provide role models for our young girls. And in addition to my role as mother and academic, I'm also a 2-term elected councilwoman for the borough of Rutherford in the state of New Jersey. Elected to serve nearly 19,000 residents of my community, I am indeed a public servant. As such, I've been granted the extraordinary opportunity to represent and advocate for the best interests of our residents, but also to be inspired by the emerging leadership of women in traditional male roles across different science disciplines who serve as examples to our next generation of young women. Today, I'm proud to be joined by a few of those amazing examples who proudly serve my hometown. They're the daily role models to the many young women across our community who are inspired to pursue the professions of forensic, police, and fire sciences. Thank you to Sergeant Julianne Ziegler, police officers Catherine Caliani and Alexandra Arnold, and firefighter Jacqueline Caraprisi, as well as our police chief, John Russo, and fire chief, Jade Fromm, for your outstanding example and inspiration to and for our community, our state, our country, and our world. I am very well aware of the challenges we as women face in diversifying our experience as we navigate the many hats we wear and the many roles we play. Today, let us celebrate the amazing journey and contribution we as women have made to our communities across all of our disciplines. Let us continue to be vigilant in providing opportunities, serving as role models, and encouraging our next generation and all those who follow to challenge perceived and actual boundaries and strive for the inclusion of girls and women in all facets of our society. Let us continue to champion these dynamic game changers across all disciplines of science, technology, and innovation. Now more than ever, the world, our communities, and most importantly, our children need your talent and contribution. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean McGowan, for your words, and congratulations from each one of us in this room for the work you're doing. In Agenda 2030, there's a very memorable phrase, reach the furthest first. And it's great to see that you, in your work at the university, in the areas you're developing, in the kind of children you're bringing to the university, you are following that principle. So congratulations. It's really wonderful to hear of the work of your university. I pass the floor now on to Ms. Sebi, who is a journalist and producer from Turkey, and she's going to talk about women and girls in science refugees. I just wanted to say that we are very time constrained, and I would request the following speakers to be as brief but get their message across with as much economy of words as possible. Ms. Sebi?
Thank you. I will be speaking as fast as possible. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you to the Royal Academy of Science and to the United Nations, to Her Royal Highness Dr. Nesrin El Hashemit, and to Dr. Helena Dali. It's an honor for me to speak here today. Today, at this special day, I would like to share with you a letter from a woman in science who is at the same time a refugee in Istanbul. Nesrin Tulemat is a young woman in her 30s. She has studied geography and specialized in maps on GPS, Geographic Information System at Damascus University in Syria, and was a teacher for geography for 7th and 8th graders for 5 years prior coming to Turkey. Now she says, I came to this country 2 years ago with my husband and little daughter. I haven't worked ever since I came here. I now am a housewife dedicated to raise my daughter. I have met so many good people in Turkey who love us Syrians and helped us in so many ways. Some of them were very happy to see us learning their language, Turkish, and trying to speak it. But one of my biggest problems is about the people who have negative judgments for us, refugees. Mostly, I worry for my daughter's future. Yes, sadly, prejudice exists today even more at a time when we are all witnessing an unprecedented level of human mobility in the world. Nesrin Tulemat is learning Turkish at the Center of Integration for Refugee Women and Democracy Association so that she could have a job in the future. She is only one of the 3.8 million refugees in Turkey, the leading country in the world today, hosting a large number of refugees, migrants, and asylum seekers. Over 3.4 million Syrian refugees, 1.6 million are children, and over 610,000 are enrolled in school. When I researched about the refugees in science, I could not come up with a clear number. Sadly, there is not any comprehensive survey on this. Today, over 40% of Syrian refugee children remain out of school. Science and technology could be incorporated for the education of these children. Among these people who had to flee the war and escape with their life and escape with their dreams are doctors, engineers, scientists, and many other professions with great potentials to change the world. As His Excellency United Nations Secretary General Mr. Guterres, while briefing his report on making migration work for all, has emphasized, migration is a positive global phenomenon. I believe we should all look at it from this perspective because it connects diverse societies, empowers the economy, and should reduce inequalities. We could make migration a positive global phenomenon by using technology, by using science and innovation. For this, women in science could lead the path for the support to integrate the refugees in science. By creating a community for all refugees in science, a platform in which they could share and express their problems, exchange their experiences, collect the right data and analysis for the number of the refugees in science for smart policy choices and support them to integrate and train them for jobs with temporary educational programs and tests to prove they fulfill the criteria needed by the regulations of the country they reside in, of course, and by encouraging and empowering refugee children to study science. The rule of law to integrate them and to protect them should be strengthened for the benefit of humanity. Today, when we talk about the women and girls in science, inequality of gender becomes prominent. But, thanks God, the world's first humanoid robot is a woman, Sophia, and she became a citizen of Saudi Arabia. This has marked the first time in history that an artificial intelligence device has been awarded such status. Well, I wish the way this country has opened its doors without any struggle for this lady, all countries around the world would have easily opened doors for the refugees, for refugee women. As a television broadcaster, a journalist, I try to cover as much as possible different profiles, success stories from the science world, because I know well that only role models can inspire children, young girls, and boys to dream or to want to become a scientist in the future. Therefore, my humble advice here to the young girls in science is a quote from my favorite poet of all times, Rumi. You are not just a drop in the ocean. You are the mighty ocean in the drop. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our final speaker for this morning is Ms. Ravdanur Kumar, and you have the floor.
Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. I would like to start my speech by thanking Her Royal Highness Princess Nesrine Al Hashimati, the Science Princess, Her Excellency Dr. Helena Dalli, Minister for European Affairs and Equalities, the Government of Malta, and the Royal Academy of Science International Trust for giving me this great opportunity to be among you today and sharing my story and experience with you. My name is Ravdanur Juma. I am whom they pointed at saying Syrian refugee. I am whom they pointed at saying you cannot, you should not, you must not, you will not, you don't, but I did. I walked at the age of 14 from my little town in North Syria all the way to a tent camp in South Turkey. Then I was lucky to be upgraded to a container camp, at least 4 walls. The light blanket was not enough to warm my body in the cold winter. I was paying the price for a crime that I never committed. I did not born as a refugee. The war in my country is not my fault. Here I am today at the United Nations headquarters, not only representing myself, not only speaking on behalf of Syrian girls, but advocating and fighting for the rights of all women and young girls, refugees, and displaced people around the world. The right to live in dignity, the right for education, the right to be women in science, contributing to the world's development, or in fact, achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. There are many of the Syrian women refugees specialized in different fields of science, including doctors, engineers, scientists, and teachers, but they are not mentioned as professionals in the statistics. With their living conditions and no jobs, they are losing the knowledge of their profession. There are also many girls, refugees, dreaming to be women in science, but they cannot achieve their dreams because of the conditions of a school in refugee camps. What if a girl refugee could be the one to invent something that has the potential to save lives, or even to be the first Women United Nations Secretary General. Because I am a refugee and I know the needs of refugees, I volunteered with many organizations such as Malala Foundation and many more to provide the help for refugees in the camp. Then, after a new foundation was established in the year 2017, I am grateful for the colleague who named it after my name, Ravda Nur Foundation, with a vision to serve refugees and displaced people. Within 7 months, we implemented projects that serves more than 10,000 children in Syria, with the intention and the willing to expand. This achievement could be too much to believe. Believe me, it's real. Because the workers in these foundations are refugees like me. We are in cooperation with many Turkish and international NGOs such as Oxfam, IGAM, Turkish Refugee Council, and many UN agencies such as UNICEF, UNHCR, and UN Women. The main focus of our work is to build the capacity of women and young girls in many refugee camps in Turkey, educate them, train them, and give them opportunities, create new jobs, and show them that the world is not about 6x2 container. One of the projects we are conducting is in Entrepreneur Camp. Our work is focused on preventing early marriage and child labor, encouraging parents to send children, particularly girls, into schools. The only way for a bright and stable future is education. This is not all. We need to do more, but how? To be able to help women in science refugees, to be able to prevent the occurrence of early marriage, to be able to prevent violence against women and girls, to be able to help children who became displaced because of the war. According to CNHR report titled Syrian Women, the Half of the Broken Society, a total of 24,746 women were killed since the beginning of the crisis in Syria in 2011. An average of 7.7 million PINs in Syria, 3.9 million of these were women and girls. 57% of assessed communities reported the occurrence of early marriage. According to ACU statistics in northern Syria camp, there are more than 2,200 female-headed households in 177 IDP camps in Idlib and Aleppo governorates. We need to include women and girls in science, refugees in data and statistics, as well as in science policy interface. To give girls, refugees, better opportunities in science, education, we need to consider the role of technology. In fact, we need women in science from around the world to help us in delivering training programs for women in science refugees and for girls refugees science education. I hope that ILO will consider women in science refugees in their strategies. I hope that UNCTAD and ITU will consider women and girls in science refugees in their action plans and frameworks. As the little girl Mariam, a Palestinian refugee from Shatila camp in Lebanon, said, "Tomorrow will be as sweet as chocolate." Your Royal Highness, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, my colleagues and I honored to to be given the chance to present the rights of women and girls in science refugees as the third International Day for Women and Girls in Science Forum. We are fully committed to share our experiences and knowledge, hoping for more cooperation and partnerships to be able to strongly deliver the needs for those women and girls in science who are in conflicted area. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you so much for those heartfelt and sincere words. And I hope everyone has put it down somewhere in their registers and how much they need to do to advance on some of these wonderful things that have been said and the pleas that have been made for greater action, especially for refugees. That brings us to the end of this morning. I know there are many of you who still want to speak. You'll have an opportunity after lunch, but this is it for this morning, and I just wanted to thank all of you for being here, for the wonderful words you've said, and be back in time for the afternoon session. So have a great lunch, bon appétit, and have a great day.